We can hold the little bit of chapter business towards the end. I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Dr. Maribel Martinez. Let's see. Currently the Emergency Preparedness Manager for the North Central Texas Council of Governments, but for 5 years up until, I guess, Monday or Friday of last week was the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Fort Worth for about 5 years, and then has, 16 years of emergency management experience, coordinated multiple large-scale events, holds a bachelor's, master's, and PhD from Texas Tech University, among many other accolades. But I want to turn the floor over to you, Maribel, and take it away.
All right, thanks, Amanda. I appreciate the invite to speak to the group. I love weather. I did all my degrees at Texas Tech, but was really in a lot of the atmospheric science type of research, did a lot of internships at National Severe Storms Lab, National Center for Atmospheric Research, and really was Hurricane Katrina that kind of switched me over to emergency management and really started my emergency management career. So I have really enjoyed working in emergency management, but really working with so many different stakeholders that we have to deal with. And then, of course, a big part of that is working with weather-related disasters. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Get started here. Okay, can y'all see that, Amanda?
It's black, but it's starting to share or thinking about it.
Okay, let me stop my video and see if that will help.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry, I am traveling. First week on the job and got a couple of conferences I'm going to and giving talks to, and hence the cow in the background. I'm in a hotel room, so I was like, oh, that's an interesting cow. I'm going to be peering at you, but I'm excited to talk about last year's winter weather event. There was so much to it. You know, we've been, over the last 2 years, we've been activated heavily with COVID operations, and it seems like we have hit every type of hazard in our emergency operations plan, one thing after the other, multiple First Amendment rallies, protests, winter storms, severe weather. We've had to activate our primary emergency operations center, our backup emergency operations center, and stand up virtual EOC. So it's really been a very busy time in emergency management. And so while we were still working the many different operations of COVID, again, we're still activated as of last Friday, and we'll continue on with the city of Fort Worth for vaccination, testing, supporting our hospitals with staffing and PPE. We're still dealing with the everyday disasters. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is looking at last year's February multi-casualty incident. I'll refer to it as MCI. Again, we're emergency managers, so we have so many different acronyms. If you hear something that you're not sure what I'm saying, I'll try to remember to tell everyone what it is. But the mass casualty incident of last February, which really led into our winter weather event, and the power outage event. And really, you know, it began on February 11th. We were in the emergency operations centers for 10 days straight. I know many of our staff, we were working 4 days straight with 4 hours of sleep, just working one issue after the other. But the incident itself, recovery operations extended into May just because of the many supply issues that we had due to COVID. And so I'll be talking about a little of that. We have really done an exhaustive after action report on this incident. Again, we really want to improve upon as a city, as an emergency management organization. And so it was nice to have the city management backup to really get an exhaustive look at what happened during this event. And with so much grant money available, provide that documentation that was needed to move forward and purchase some things, redo some things, buy some supplies to get ready for the next storm. And fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know, whichever way you see it, my last week was again another winter weather activation. We activated for 3 days last week, and really got to see a lot of the corrective actions take place, and really was a non-event for us. So this was, I think, let me see if I can, are you seeing the video on the side? Is that better? Move this down. All right. Can y'all see the timeline of events slide that is up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, with the timeline of events, for us, we were, again, heavy in COVID operations. And so we had Texas Motor Speedway along with the other multiple vaccination sites, testing sites that we were doing with the city and then supporting Tarrant County and Denton County. And so we had a lot of operations up at Texas Motor Speedway where you could easily have 200 people working the event. I'm sure you've heard the news and the operation up there, but we were seeing at times 10,000, 15,000 shots given in a day. And so it was a big operation for us. And so we had a little bit of a weather concern the 8th and the 9th, and we had operations ongoing. So we had different situation reports that we sent out to our groups, again, just making sure that they were aware of any icy spots as they headed up north. Again, with up there is a little bit icier than what we see sometimes in downtown Fort Worth. And so we were supporting the vaccination efforts. We were listening again to all the Weather Service calls locally, as well as the state operations calls, sending out situation reports. We kind of knew going in, again, by the weather conference calls and looking at stuff, is that it was going to be cold. And it was going to be very cold for a long period of time. So we were already gearing for at least, 4 or 5 days in the emergency operations center. We wanted to make sure we were good with our different shifts. We wanted to make sure that our public works teams were working with TxDOT, making sure that our school systems were aware of the situation, continuity of operations for the city, looking at the essential functions that needed to be done. And just knowing that, this event, again, was going to be cold, but some of the roads may be impacted. It's going to be a little bit icy. People wouldn't be able to go in. Unfortunately, due to COVID, again, telework was in place and really did help. But of course, when you have power outages, you don't have power. And so it sometimes made it difficult for people to be on computers or remoting in or calling into different calls. So we knew that we also wanted an in-emergency operations center component to make sure that we coordinate the response for the event. As we were going on, the morning of February the 11th, 3:40 in the morning, we have our usual Fort Worth National Weather Service call. We at that point was kind of your typical, it may be slick in spots. For us as a city, we really kind of cue in on that 28-degree threshold, because that's kind of when we start seeing a lot of issues on our roadways. And it was just borderline. We started to monitor chat, again, getting reports of some freezing ice falling. Had our duty officer go into the EOC, kind of just start monitoring, and then we would have more people come in as needed. Again, it was a typical work day on Thursday, February the 11th. And then, of course, shortly after 6, had initial report of a larger accident on 35. Again, the initial reports were about 10 vehicles. It kept growing. And that kind of kicked off pretty much our winter weather activation. And I'll go into the mass casualty incident a little bit more on the response there. But I just kind of wanted to give you an overview that this was a pretty long activation for us. Probably one of the longest ones besides COVID. And for me, we've been working 2 years in COVID operations, but for me, in my all years in emergency management, was really the worst disaster that I had ever experienced and helped coordinate, just because there were so many ongoing issues that we had to deal with, and they were all of life safety important. So I'll go through those issues that we had to face. So this was the pilot. For many of you have seen pictures, many of you have seen the video, again, coming up on the 1-year anniversary of it. It was, again, a very long response scene shortly after 6 o'clock in the morning. Kind of one of those that, okay, it was going to be icy in spots, but one that, you know, people was like, well, it's just another winter storm. Here's more into the timeline. Again, as the incident wore on, we knew that we were dealing with a lot more vehicles. It was very difficult for our first responders to access the different areas. We had reports of 3 different types of command areas just because of the length of the accident scene. We were able to get our city crews to sand a lot of the access roads so that our emergency responders could get to the scene. Here is a continuation of the timeline. Again, at 6:45, this is a bigger deal, and so at that point we decided to activate our emergency operations center at 7 o'clock. At that point, again, we knew we were dealing with multiple vehicles. People were trying to get out of the cold. It was, you know, temperatures in the 20s, really cold wind chills. It was still kind of freezing rain. But even so, for the safety issue, I'll go into the injuries and fatalities here in a bit, but we did have 6 fatalities due to this incident. And many of those were people that actually survived the initial crash, but once they got out from their vehicle and from vehicles just ramming into each other and really not slowing down. Some of it was, again, to the slope of the roadway, but actually passed away from secondary hits while on the freeway. At 8:30 in the morning, a mass casualty was officially declared. That opened up the notification to additional hospitals, to additional ambulances. MedStar did a phenomenal job. I'll show you in a bit how many ambulances they sent on scene, but even having them in our emergency operations center, coordinating with the hospitals, we were able to know, you know, who we're transporting to the different hospitals. And it really helped on our family reunification center that was activated close to the crash scene. So we did have a call center established, again, working with a lot of our different departments. We had a lot of good lessons learned. Our Police Victim Assistance Center set that up. You know, again, it wasn't just local people. It was people that were driving in from the region. It was people that were just driving through the area. And so even a couple of weeks after this incident, we were getting calls on that hotline, people still looking for their loved ones. They just didn't know, they hadn't heard from people, and they didn't know if they were still, could possibly be a victim. So working those issues, again, we couldn't have done it without our Victim Assistance Center and doing the callbacks with our MedStar personnel, knowing where each of the patients were located. Unfortunately, again, we did have some fatalities. And so working with the medical examiner's office to make those notifications to the families. We had at least 3 people that called into our EOC, very good friends with the people that we work with. And unfortunately, we knew the name was on the deceased list and we could not tell them because, you know, we had to follow the process and make sure that that's vetted through the medical examiner's office and then coordinated accordingly. We had 26 people transported via buses. People went to the community center that was staffed by, again, our Parks and Rec department. I had 2 staff there. Our police department, our public information officers were there since this was already making national news. And then on the side there is just some of the social media postings we were doing. Again, we were trying to create that unified approach amongst all our public information officers from fire, PD, and emergency management to get the word out of people looking for their families. So on the response side, these are the numbers. Again, it was 103 single unit vehicles that were involved in the crash. Because 16 of those were tractor trailers, those count as 2 vehicles, and that's how the 135 vehicle numbers was reached. 36 people transported to different area hospitals. You can see the breakdown there, and again, that was that was the coordinating element in our emergency operations center, and making sure that the families knew exactly which hospital their loved ones went to. Unfortunately, we did have 6 fatalities for this particular incident. We had so many first responders respond, and they were there till the day after. And our EOC continued to remain 24/7 through the remainder of February. We had a lot of different support, again, 13 different ambulances, a lot of fire units on scene, search and rescue tools, a lot of the different assets that we were able to purchase because of grant dollars. We had overall 60 tow trucks that were deployed to the scene. Again, with that, all the vehicles had to be transported to a certain place. People that were transported to their unification center had to coordinate where to get their vehicles if they were drivable shape. So again, that was something that again was coordinated through our emergency operations center. And then a lot of buses to transport people again to the center, and buses just to keep on site so people could stay warm, because some of their family was coming to pick them up there from the crash scene. So with that, is again, we were in operations. We were still listening to the conference calls for the upcoming winter weather event that we had been preparing for, making sure that our city departments were ready, and that our all our sheltering and warming centers teams knew the battle rhythm for the coming days ahead. And these are, again, some of the stats on the weather side that I think you all are familiar with. Coldest air in over 3 decades, the coldest 3-day stretch, historic wind chill warnings. But overall, Fort Worth was 232 hours below freezing. Again, so we knew this was going to be a cold system. Again, thinking 1 to 2 inches of snow, but if you're from the area, you know 1 to 2 inches of snow is a big deal for us. And so we were making sure that we were prepared. At this point, early on Thursday, Friday, the only power outages that we were thinking we're going to be from the freezing rain and the ice impact. And so at that point, they said there possibly could be some rolling outages, nothing to what we had seen. Again, they were saying 1 to 2 inches, or 1 to 2 hours, if that, but nothing in the 1 to 2 days. So again, we did stage assets during the week before. That entire week, we knew which warming centers we were going to activate, what shelters we were going to activate. So it was a matter of getting the cots, getting the blankets there. In our emergency operations center, we brought in additional cots to our bays, blankets, food, water. We stocked our freezer with lasagnas and Hot Pockets that I am so thankful that we did, because we were able to use those, shifting it out to people, and that's ultimately what some of us ate in the EOC. But we had 24 EOC operations, but it really didn't get bad until Sunday night going into Monday. So we did have different rounds of precipitation, but that Sunday night going into Monday morning around the 1 a.m. time frame is when we got word that they were going to start the rolling outages. And although we had made lists, notifications when that was to begin, we made those, but then we just began to see one issue after the other. So this is a list, as I was putting this together, of some of the things that was, again, just calls nonstop to our call centers, to our EOC, to our 911 systems. All our call centers were getting inundated, both on the city side, on the Encore side, on the water department side. We still were dealing with some icy roadways. Our public works team was out, but it was just starting to get really cold, and power was not coming back, and the citizens were really panicking. It was anything from, I've got 5% battery left on my phone, I am on an oxygen tank, it's at 20%, I'm really worried, what do I do? And then arranging transport. It's activating winter center warming centers that we had pre-staged, but it still takes some time to physically open. It's people calling that they don't have heaters, that they don't have generators for their different needs, medical needs. It was our fuel pumps starting to get really slow on our city vehicles. Overall, we evacuated 33 different nursing homes to areas that had power. We had hospitals that were on generators, but they were still needing cooling. And so it was transporting some of our fire tanker water to the hospitals to make sure that they could still run. I believe we were within, I think it was an hour and 22 minutes from losing a big part of our communications component in the region, but we were able to get them water. It was, again, lack of restaurants and food for some of our shelter teams, for our EOC. There was a couple of days, luckily we had supplies. It was myself and my staff making breakfast burritos at 5 o'clock in the morning to feed our teams that were working in our EOC. It was different supply shortages. It was food banks and Meals on Wheels not be able to do their deliveries, so coordinating the transport with our military forces, our National Guard, so that they could deliver food to those that was needed. It was people that were calling in that didn't have formula for their babies, or water for their elderly parents to take their medication. So it was making those type of deliveries. We had different strike teams to help out our water department once we got later into the event, and had so many water main breaks, more than we've seen in an entire year come in just a few days. It was bringing in water. Our water department team, they had plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. And we have so much older cast iron piping for our water distribution in the city of Fort Worth. Again, the city of Fort Worth is the 12th largest city in the US, and just keeping up with that growth has been an issue. But they knew they did not want to bring that colder water from Lake Worth into the system, because it would create more issues. But ultimately they had to do it because of power failure to other sites. And so it was doing water boil notices. Fortunately for us, we kind of knew once the water department, said that they were going to have to do that, it was okay. We are entering a resource request to our state to bring in bottled water and gallon water, because we know the issues we're going to have 2-3 days down the road. And if we had not done that, we would not have water to give out. We set up 10 different water distribution points across the city. And we weren't limiting it to city of Fort Worth. Again, it's people that need the water, for their families, for their elderly parents, for their kids. And so we fortunately had truckloads come. We had FEMA knocking on the door of the EOC with, "Hey, we just have a truck full of water. Can y'all use it?" And so we were happy to share with our regional partners and have enough for our city as well. Where other jurisdictions around us weren't as fortunate and just could not get additional water from the state. One thing I will hit on, so in our EOC, while everybody else was so cold and going through those issues, we had the opposite issue in our EOC. Our AC, so we don't have a heater system in our emergency operations center because of all the computer equipment, the radio equipment that we have. And so that heat really heats our facility. Well, when our AC unit froze up, it was just so hot in our emergency operations center. So we were all sweating and working in t-shirts, which was very, very odd for us, working a winter storm in t-shirts, and it just had fans blowing because it was so hot in our EOC. But we had to keep it cool to maintain the radio system for our region. This goes a little bit more. I'm not going to read the slides. Some of the numbers on our ice and snow treatment for the city. Again, a lot of dedicated employees, and some of them, had very little food or just, did what they could, but they were there to support the city and be there to make sure that we had a cohesive response. This is our park and recreation warming centers. Again, we're there just to people to come in, stay warm for the day, if they needed to charge their phone or laptop. And also, as we went into the event, some of those would transition to sheltering centers, just because there was so much uncertainty in the power. And as much as we gave, that critical infrastructure list beforehand and even during the event, it was just something that, Encore could not keep up with. Okay, we need to keep power here because we have people here. It was just a struggle during the event because they couldn't tell what would come up or be down. And then, of course, we did open the convention center to shelter individuals. We had 480 bed nights. Again, this was still, COVID was a concern. We had the social distance within the beds themselves. We had the mask, we had testing, we had vaccination available, but just something else that we had to consider as we were setting up shelters. Again, more by the numbers. A lot of people served at our warming centers, a lot of people at our sheltering, but just the amount of calls received, the amount of people impacted by the water boil notices, and still dealing with a lot of issues on our city facilities, one thing after another. But it was nice to have all our stakeholders and all our departments within our EOC working the issues. Again, more on the water impacts. Again, we did have 3 of the 4 water treatment plants lose power, plus the booster pumps. It took us a little bit to recover from that. We did 3 boil water notices impacting 300,000 people. Everything was overwhelmed, but we were happy that we had the water distribution sites to help the people and distributed over 625,000 bottles of water. The graphic there is something that we set up in Smart Sheets to kind of track the progress during the day and then ship more water as we saw the inventory getting lower. So just a few of the sites that we distributed water. There are some of the partners. We could not have done it with our community partners, without our private business partners either. One thing after the other, if we needed something, we knew we had a group we could reach out to, and they really did step up to the plate to assist us, because this was something that we just had never seen before to this extent with the power outages. It really wasn't the winter weather. I mean, it was the cold, but that caused the power outages, but it led to so many different cascading impacts that was just so overwhelming for our city and across the state as well. And then the business donations. There was times where we needed, a big type of heater, a construction type heater, and we would have it within 10 minutes. There was one morning we were down to 1 pallet of waters. We had these schedule already distributed, and what are we going to do? We open in 2 hours. How are we going to have enough water to give away? Because we were waiting on a big truck from the state that was yet to arrive. And I kid you not, in 2 hours, we had so much water to give away, plus enough to store for the next 3 days operations. But it was a lot of our private businesses, Cowtown Brewery, Panther Island Brewery, our Walmarts, our Sam's, jumping in and just say, here's some water. And I know it was difficult because there were so many in the community trying to buy the water, and there just wasn't any available, but they were trying to push that from downstate to get it to the areas that needed it. And then just, we had potable water, but some people just didn't have buckets. So Best Made Pickles donated some buckets. We were able to get some other gallon jugs from Taco Casa and some other supplies. And it was just so nice to see everybody jumping in to assist us with this operation. So again, there were so many strengths that were identified, but with every incident, there are so many lessons that are learned. And that's something that incident after incident, or even after exercise, you're never going to have a perfect response. You're always going to have room for improvement, things to learn. And that was the main point. I've given so many this presentation so many ways, and today I gave it on the after action report this morning, and we had an exhaustive after action report completed because of this, because we wanted to document, what were our issues and how can we move forward, what can we identify the root issue and fix it for next time. And in doing so, you create a more resilient city in a more resilient, region. And so that was really important for us. And so there's been a lot of work done by our office, but also all the different city departments and our stakeholders to say, hey, yeah, I remember that from the after action report. Let's make sure that we do this on this round, or even having working groups in the last 4 months to fix some of the issues with the call centers. Now, all our call centers are redundant to each other. So municipal courts, 911, our city call center, they all support each other if needed. And so they were integrated into our operation last week. We had the morning and the evening calls, and although we had 30 to 40 people in our EOC for operations, we probably had at least 100, 150 supporting virtually. And so it was important that we were all in the same common operating picture and knew what was going on. And it was just interesting to see all the changes implemented. And then finally, as we got a storm last week, to see that. And I have a lot of the same issues. Was it, in part by the public messaging from our Joint Information Center? We'll never know, but it was just nice to see everybody coming together and for the next storm, and something that we'll continue to improve upon as a city. So that is all I have. Is there any questions?
Yes, this is Bernard. I'm retired weather service. And I think it was fascinating with this event that, you have all the plans in place, but then for just cold, but you had the problem of the icy roads to transport, to move around the people, the volunteers that needed to be where they couldn't get to. And then on top of that, all the COVID. So that limits, the contacts with people. You have to keep the separation and the like. So it was really fascinating to see all that. And I guess now you had this event last year, that the way communications have changed in the last not too many years, that now everybody has the cell phones. You have things like Twitter. I don't know to what extent you use that. I know the Weather Service, we adopted a lot of that, got Facebook and whatever as ways to get the message out to people, but recognizing there's still a lot of the general public that doesn't necessarily have access to that, but hopefully at least all the communication with your folks. Back even in the Katrina age, when we were working with emergency managers back then, in many cases, it was the fax machine is the one thing that in some small county somewhere, that was their communication. So can you talk a little bit about all the various modes of communication, and then how do you get consistent messaging when you have so many different channels of communication?
Yes. So that is a big component of our Joint Information Center. And that's what I love when we have these big events, that they bring all the public information officers, which I think is about 15 or 20 within the city. And everyone has their own different social media channels, media contacts, everything from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor. Trying to think of what else we have, the different City of Fort Worth app. And so they all have their different followers. And so that's kind of, once we activate our Joint Information Center, it's really, okay, what type of incident is this? Is this a active shooter? Okay, PD is going to take the lead. Is this a weather event? Okay, emergency manager is going to take the lead. And so that one agency takes the lead, and then each public information officer is supposed to share it. Our Park and Rec PIO, our city PIO, they will all share it. And so it gets the message and multiplies it across all the different channels. I know we have different mass notification systems. We had switched from Nixle to Code Red. Honestly, I think there's still some room to improve upon there. I I would really like to see us with all the changes in technology is for people not to have to register for a notification system, that there are other ways, or, you know, either whether it's boards, whether it's car system ways, you know, we've utilized Waze and Google for different special events and making notifications there, is that it's automatically with the cell phone, through iPods. That's something that we haven't gotten into either. I think that really needs to be moving forward, is making it a little bit more excessive, have different ways to get the information. The city channel, I think they try to do YouTube as well. So it's something that they still continue to look on, because again, we have so many different channels, but those are our primary channels that we've utilized. Another question?
So I actually have a question. I was curious, since you guys did do such an extensive after action review, if you could talk about some of the specifics between last winter storm and last week, what changes you noticed as far as coming from the after action report and being implemented recently?
So I think for us, it was, again, probably last Sunday is when we started looking at the forecast, started receiving our emails from the weather service. And so we were looking, okay, we're going to have to start planning come Monday. By Monday morning, we had all our city department, majority of our city departments that would be involved in the activation saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And so it was getting everybody. We scheduled some planning meetings that Monday, that Tuesday, and everybody was jumping on board to make sure we had the battle rhythm for the warming centers, that we had what shelter we were going to do, where we were going to stage assets, going ahead and buying food and snacks, which was identified in the after action report, making sure that they were ready, the go kits for the community centers. If we did have another mass casualty incident, that they could open a family assistance center really quick and on the fly. So those were some of the lessons. And then as we got into the activation again, because of COVID and the virtual environment that we were in, there was just so much we had done virtually with teams also in person. And so there was one thing that was identified in the after action report was having those meetings for everybody. And so we did that again twice a day that include everybody on the different operations that were ongoing. So that was a good lesson learned. Again, just making sure that everything's in order and organized. And if there are any roadblocks or issues, that we can address those, because we may not know that in the EOC, but there might be teams out in the field that may need feeding, or that may need, certain resources, and we just don't know that they're out there because their department head is not in the emergency operations center. Trying to think of there was so many different corrective action items. Another one was the water department. So the water department had their separate emergency, they call it emergency operations center offsite, and last year. For this one, they decided to co-locate with us. And so we saw a lot more information flow, sharing of information, and then they were able to, start standing up different, we call them hotshot units, to assist the water department, because last year they were just they were trying to do it all themselves, and they weren't using the city resources that were available to them. And so we were able to supplement them with code department and park and rec staff, and have the 4-wheel drives ready to go if they were needed. Trying to think of other corrective action items. Another one was unified command, especially for the mass casualty incident. I know it's a large area, but ideally you should still have one area command that is kind of streamlining resources into the area and coordinating as different agencies are coming on site. that has been something that with so much turnover has been difficult with our fire and police and MedStar. But it's something that we've continued quarterly training specific to unified command. And although we didn't have as big of an incident this year, but we had some larger apartment issues that really helped ease the coordination with our emergency operations center. And we have scheduled a larger training class for 50 of our people, again, a mix of emergency operations center people and unified command people, to go down to College Station and to attend a week-long training on just communicating with each other. And we hope to extend that, on an annual basis. Another one was just staffing. COVID, there was a hiring freeze with the city. I know for my staff, typically we have about 18 people in our emergency management. Because of COVID and because of the hiring freeze, we were really short staffed last year during the winter storm. And this year, fortunately, in January, early January, I was able to hire 3 of my positions, and a lot of the other departments were able to hire some of their vacancies as well. So that did help a little bit more on the staffing side as we were staffing warming sites, as we were coordinating, as we were planning. It just helped out overall. All right, any other questions? And I can't see chat, so Amanda, if you'll help me if you see anything in chat.
I haven't seen anything show up yet.
This is Mike Eskin. I have a question about your new function with the Council of Governments. You basically taking your experience and spreading that information out, or tell us what your functions will be with the Council of Governments now.
Yeah, so I'm excited to join the North Central Texas Council of Governments, working with Molly and the emergency preparedness team. Still trying to figure out what I'll be doing, but I know we've had so much great feedback of different projects that we want to enter, now that we're kind of, I think, in the post-COVID world. There's been so much turnover within our emergency managers within the region. And so trying to get everybody back into that training and exercise mode, back into just so many lessons learned is really kind of taking the after action report that we did with the city and kind of doing that regionally. The Council of Government supports 13 different working groups. And, we have a complex coordinated terrorist attack, or even another one of these is really trying to figure out how we can support each other and how information can flow. We had a big exercise back in August that involved an attack in Texas Motor Speedway, downtown Dallas, Arlington Stadium, and the airport, and just so many issues there as we were working through the exercise that need to be worked on, and how we can better communicate, how can we better coordinate different resources, because this area is so resource rich. So it is going to be working with all our region, all our stakeholders, to kind of just make sure that we coordinate, that we communicate, and that we provide the help that is needed and to assist the state as needed. So I know there's emergency management overall, I think is shifting towards the better, becoming a little bit more professionalized and changing on the state side. There's talks about licensing the profession. So I'm excited to see how we can build up our profession, build up, our colleagues that are working crazy hours and make sure that, they can sustain that. So I'm excited to support our community, our EM community, and the COG just seemed to be a perfect fit for that. So I was excited when I got the job and look forward to the different challenges and new things we can do there.
Hey, you got a couple of COG people online here, so we're trying to draft you already into our project.
So yeah, I was going to mention, so hi Maribel, I'm Shannon Stevenson. I don't think we've met. Our paths just haven't crossed yet, but I'm a senior program manager in transportation at the Council of Governments. And
Okay.
And
awesome.
Sort of in and out of weather. My background is weather from OU and worked in weather before I came to the COG, actually 20 years ago. I can't believe I've been.
Wow.
But so yeah, so it'll be nice to meet you in person at some point. And
Absolutely. I'm
great.
looking forward to it. I know COG has some great people, so there's just so much data. I'm a data person, and there's just so many things that you can do with it. So many tools, technology is constantly changing. So I'm excited for the new partnerships and things that we can do to help our different EOCs in the region, because there's a lot of people that are going through, staffing levels just changing, grants are going away, and they're finding themselves having to do everything. So I'm looking forward to find ways that we can assist and use all our different partners.
Very good. Great.
Yeah, hurry up. Come on over.
So Scott, good deal. Any other questions? All right. Well, I've enjoyed giving this talk. Like I said, the weather community is true and dear to my heart. I love weather. So when Amanda asked if I'd give it, I know I guess 2 years ago, JJ Brost asked me to give a talk, and that was the day we had our first COVID patient with the city of Fort Worth, and so things got really crazy, and so I unfortunately had to cancel back in 2020. So glad I could do this on the winter storm.
Yes, thank you so much for agreeing to give the presentation. It was very insightful and informative. Before I forget, if you can send me through email a mailing address so that we can send you something to show our appreciation, I would be greatly appreciative of that. But yeah, thanks again for spending time with us this evening. It was great.
Thanks, Amanda.
So as far as the rest of the meeting, I don't have too much as far as business goes, other than if you haven't paid your annual dues, send those in. And then our next meeting will be March the 8th. Derek Giardino from West Gulf River Forecast Center will be the speaker for that particular meeting. And unless there are any other things that need to be brought up, that was really all I had.
Sounds like we're done.
Sounds like it. Y'all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.